So there is a naturalness to being yourself, a complete and utter naturalness to being yourself. We are not speaking of something that is not completely natural and simple. We're not speaking of avoiding or denying anything. We're speaking of such an openness that includes everything completely and utterly. But as we come to this openness that includes everything, there is a shifting in perspective of seeing that happens that allows there to be an including of absolutely everything, because the perspective of seeing shifts out of separation and victimhood. The perspective of seeing itself, the consciousness itself, consciously wakes up to be aware of itself as something greater than the sense of separated me and mine. What is being spoken about, you already are. So it is not about becoming anything, not about becoming anything new. It's about being yourself, your eternal, timeless self, that which you have always been. And it is just that there is an overlaid distraction away from this. And so the mind can create so many kinds of resistances and try to make being the being and this truth somehow difficult or challenging or wrong, right? But the mind just wants to resist. The mind wants to be right. But what the mind really wants is to let go and relax into its true nature. And so this invitation is about that letting go. This invitation is about letting go of the mind's resistance, the mind's need to know, the mind's sense of being a victim to life, the mind's sense of knowing something, of being someone. The mind can say, well, I don't want to let go of the person, and I don't want to bypass, and I don't want to, ignore life. But that's all the mind's limited perspective of what it imagines reality is. It's not actually what reality is, right? Reality is this all-inclusive simplicity. It's not against the mind, it's not denying the mind. It's just that as the perspective shifts, the seeing of what mind is shifts too. And we could say what mind is consciousness playing in a pattern. And what shifts is that pattern lets go into what it belongs to. And so there is this freedom inside you. There is this truth inside you. There is this peace inside you. And this invitation is to look within and find what is alive and awake inside you. What is it that you are that is already free and clear and pure? What is it that you are that is already everything that you are longing for? Nothing about this truth is asking the mind to recreate itself. And it's not asking the mind to do anything at all. But the mind imagines that something is being asked of it that it cannot do, or is not pleasant, or takes it away from something important and relevant. But that's the mind's limited perspective. It's not like that at all. And the invitation to come to the here and now, to the felt sense of being, is that by grace, we have this possibility in direct experience to open to what we are in our fullness, what we are in truth. Every being has this possibility. It doesn't require anything. And it's just in this felt sense of being present that we can acknowledge that the direct experience is freedom, is simplicity, is openness, and that here there is no story, there is no challenge. And even if it's a nanosecond of directly recognizing this freedom, this is the grace that offers the illuminated pathway into yourself. The mind has so many ideas about what this is and what it isn't, but every thought, every idea is not truth. Every thought is the me thinking about itself. And the me naturally has a self-interest, but that self-interest is a me interest. It's interested in the survival of the me. And what we're speaking of is not, as may sometimes get spoken of in certain circles, like an annihilation of the me, or annihilation or a death of the ego. And of course, that which is the ego finds that fearful and stressful and a terrible idea. But we don't need to speak in those terms, because it's not actually essentially true. It's that what ego patterning is consciousness. And consciousness has a natural evolutionary impulse to know itself and be itself. And its natural evolutionary impulse is to know the fullness of itself and to keep opening to finer and finer frequencies of itself. And so, even if there is a longing for this truth, this in itself is such incredible grace to have a longing, a yearning, a pull to this truth. And it cannot be cultivated, right? The yearning is something that is naturally here. And it is a sign of a mature soul, a mature being that is ready. And it doesn't mean that there's an opposite to that as an immature or an unready being, right? The mind plays in opposites, and then the mind doesn't like, well, I don't want to be that. I want to be the mature, ready one, right? The mind wants to be the best. The mind wants to get it. But in the landscape of truth, it just doesn't matter. We are where we are, and we are always whole. We are always one with the oneness, right? We are always divine. And so this unfolding, it's not about becoming something. It's not about leaving something. It's not about doing anything. It's not about changing anything as an active project. It's just a simple invitation in this moment, to come to the peace of the being that is before thought, before challenge, before problem. Just right here now, in this moment, to not allow then the thought that says, yeah, but what about imagining a future? To just let go of that for this moment and to be free. Be the freedom that is inside you. Be the peace that is alive and awake here. Be free of suffering in this moment, without the mind saying, yeah, but what about? Without the mind's ideas of what it's leaving or not working on. Just to let go of all of that through being here now so fully, being here and just being in the felt sense of the simple awake being that you are, right? There's a naturalness, a simplicity. It is not asking anything of anyone, and it is not hierarchical in any way. Every being, every point in the whole of infinity is this same one being. And this invitation, this simple, timeless invitation, is the invitation to know yourself and know the freedom that you are right now, to know the love, the openness, the peace that you are right now. It's a simple invitation to just stop and let go into this moment, that whatever is happening on the surface of life, whatever the circumstances of the life are, to just meet yourself before the story in the alive awakeness of heart, so that you can, in a way, be the guide for your own mind. You can be the guide through being that wide open heart that is peaceful and simple, just being. That you can be the guide, that the mind can relax, collapse into. That the mind finds safety only when you are resting in yourself. There is no safety in the external world. True safety only is felt in the presence of being, in the presence of the timeless, eternal. True safety is only felt in that which can never leave, that which can never disappoint. The mind imagines that safety is in finding wholeness in some kind of experience or relationship in the external, and then is constantly disappointed. But right here now in this moment, there is safety, because this timeless invitation keeps repeating itself, and it's always true, and it's always free, and it's always innocent and pure. And as the timeless invitation repeats itself, at some point, every being has the possibility of really receiving this invitation, receiving it in the heart, receiving the invitation to come into the wide open heart of yourself, just simply being. Now, it's not an invitation for the mind, but the mind can understand a certain amount, but the mind is limited. It's a limited functioning of consciousness, and it cannot understand the fullness. And when it cannot understand the fullness, it tries to fill in the gaps with concepts and ideas. So in this moment, as we speak of the activity of mind and the habits of mind, we're just illuminating all of the protective habits that have been learned, that are conditioned, that keep us from this freedom, from this truth, from the simplicity and natural connection to the one being, right? You are not a separate individual that is divided from the whole. You are not an island, right? The me imagines themselves to be an island. There is victimhood in the sense of separation. The me feels like a victim to life, like life is happening to me. And it feels like it has to then work really hard in the challenges of life and succeed. But this truth is so much simpler. This truth is the invitation to stop all the work, all of the ideas, and just to be here in this moment, this timeless moment. To be here and to feel the felt sense of your own presence just being here. To feel yourself here before any thought, aware of thought, aware of body, but as the awareness that is simply being, this felt sense of simple existence, to just sample the freedom of true nature, to just remember the freedom of true nature. So the invitation, the perennial invitation, it repeats itself wherever it can, constantly. It's like a timeless mantra, right? Saying, this is who you are. This is who you are. You are this love, this being, this innocent, pure, divine wholeness. You are this wide open heart. You are utterly free. You are pure and innocent, immaculate being, and you have always been, right? It's not an instruction. It's not a doing. It's an invitation to remember. And at some point, the consciousness that has a longing and a yearning to know this truth, at some point, it is divinely ready, divinely matured and ripe, that it can actually receive the invitation deeply enough for the perspective of seeing to shift, right? So in this process, we glimpse, we taste, and at some point, it just lands. Oh, what I am is not divided, fragmented, separate. What I am is not a person, an island. What I am is this presence, the presence of being, right? And it's not a mental cognition. It's a deep cognition of heart, of being. It's a cognition, a recognition, recognition in the being itself, in consciousness itself. So let's say the cognition, the recognition in consciousness itself is at a subtler frequency than mind recognizing things that it understands, right? So there's a cognition that happens in the intellect, right? Which in a way, intellect is an area of mind consciousness. So the intellect can recognize things and understand things, but that is all within a limited functioning of consciousness. So this recognition in consciousness itself, it's a finer frequency. It's a deeper, more profound recognition. And it's a recognition that shifts the perspective of seeing. So one of the things that can happen as these words come, speaking about shifting perspective, the mind can sneak in and say, oh, has that happened? Have I got it? Right? Have I realized that? So not to let the mind co-opt this moment. Of course, the true recognition cannot be stolen away by the mind because the subtle frequency is always here. And let's say the subtler frequencies that we open to never ever close. As we forge an opening into the finer and finer frequencies of the being, what we open to never ever closes. But what can happen is that the layers of mind and doubt and the need to understand can fog up, dull out the true depth of recognition. And so along comes satsang, right? Satsang, the perennial invitation to remember and remember and to taste again the fine frequency of being that does know itself. You do know yourself because you already are this that we are speaking of. And the heart already knows. The heart always knows. And as this invitation is repeated and shared, and the resonance of recognition is alive, you start to feel in the innermost being, in the heart of yourself, your true heart, the freedom that is here now. It's like a fresh resonance of recognition. And you don't have to worry about, well, what about life and all this work that I need to do? You don't have to worry about anything. It's not leaving anything out. So it's to really be aware that whatever the mind brings in as some kind of distraction, it's not to try to answer or appease the mind. It's about deepening into this freedom so that the perspective of seeing shifts deeply enough to be able to animate the whole of the life, right? Because the finer frequencies that we open to, it's like then all of life is nourished by the finest possibility that we are open to, right? So our unique life, right? In a way, the felt sense that we have a unique life, we do, but it's not separate in any way. The sense of the unique life is a flow of the totality, never divided, always moving as one. It's not unique and separate. It's not individual and separate. It's all included in the oneness, right? So one thing the mind can struggle with is, yeah, but I have a unique experience, and there can be a subtlety because the me deeply wants to hang on to the me and mine. It's not that, but there are unique laws of nature that make up a unique unfolding and give, in a way, the point of infinity that you have felt yourself to be as the person, a unique flavor and a unique configuration of laws of nature, right? And so, in a way, this whole unfolding is about removing the veils that obscure this truth. It's about letting go of protections and conditionings as we illuminate everything that is limiting. We keep illuminating everything that is limiting. And what is limiting is conditioning, protection, defense, patternings, habits, concepts, ideas, beliefs. All of these words are pointing to essentially patternings in consciousness that are limiting. So really, this whole unfolding is about releasing the limited patterning and merging into the vast openness of the true being, really restoring the natural connection to being. That there's a naturalness to being yourself. It's not an elevation, it's not an ascension. It's a deep dropping in to the heart, to the the deep, soft belly of yourself, right? The wide open heart, the soft belly. It's dropping right into yourself, out of your head, out of the mind, out of the dense, busy frequency that's like noise. It's dropping out of the mind consciousness and the busyness and the challenge and the constant chatter, the constant criticism and hardship, victimhood, right? It's about dropping out of that into the wide open heart and dropping into the deep, soft belly of your own innocence, right? Dropping all the way into your wholeness. It's not what the mind imagines. The mind is up here saying, don't let go, don't let go, don't let go, don't let go. It's going to get you. It's going to catch you. It's going to bite you in the bum, right? Don't let go. Don't let go. Keep everything as it is. Hold on, hold on, hold on. And then struggle because, oh, it's so hard here. It's so hard here. It's so hard here. All I want is love and safety and belonging and fullness, right? Let go into the longing. Relax into the longing. Know that the longing is grace. The longing for freedom, the longing to let go, the longing to know yourself. And whatever words we give that, longing to awaken, longing for enlightenment, longing for God, for truth, for freedom, whatever it is, to just let go into the felt sense of the longing to let go, the longing to be yourself, the longing to feel safe, the longing to feel whole, right? It's this longing to let go of the tension of trying, of efforting, of working so hard, of feeling like failing, of feeling hurt and wounded. Just to let go of all of that not enoughness, unlovableness, unworthiness, right? The longing to just let it all go into something that can hold you, right? But the only thing that has the ability to hold you so fully is, curiously, yourself, right? We long to be held in the external. And it's not that there is not support and holding that comes in along the way as grace. That's for sure. But it's to know that we can be disappointed if we let go into a holding of someone or something, a structure that is temporary or transient or conditional, right? And most relationships are based in dynamics that are conditional. So we can never really fully let all the way go, right? We can only really let go into the deep and profound safety of our own self, our own heart, right? So here comes satsang. That is your heart, right? Beyond mind's possibility to understand. But satsang is the wide open heart. Satsang is your creation of heart, right? It's the safety, it's the love, it's the presence where the mind tension can let go into the wide open heart that is presence of being. It's not letting go into satsang as a thing. It's letting go into your own resonant presence, right? It's letting go into yourself. Satsang is the company of yourself. Again, satsang is not what the mind imagines satsang to be. Satsang is the company of yourself and the resonance of yourself, right? But again, there has to be a discernment to be able to feel the resonance of truth, of clarity, of purity. And depending upon the maturity, we will come to be able to perceive and receive the finest frequency that we have the capacity for, right? So in truth, satsang is not something external. In true satsang, right? We have to be a little careful because there can be things, of course, on the surface of life that can call themselves satsang that maybe are not the fullness of what satsang is. Satsang is recognized within yourself, right? can never project even what satsang is externally. You have to have the discernment. And the discernment comes as you recognize the being, as you come to the longing, and you feel a resonance of recognition. You feel a pull, a magnetic pull. And then that is what you are creating in your own consciousness. And it is offering some kind of grace, right? But the recognition is in yourself. It's not a recognition of something external. It's the recognition of yourself. It's the recognition of your own eternal being. It's the company of yourself, right? It's a meeting yourself. And so mind consciousness drops into heart consciousness. And heart consciousness is the being. Heart consciousness is the openness, the fullness of yourself, simply being. It's the peace, the aliveness of pure presence right here now. It is the simplicity of being that is just right here now. So to recognize the longing, to follow the longing into the felt sense of the aliveness of the longing, is to move from mind consciousness into that which is naturally guiding you into yourself, into the heart, into the being. So longing is grace. Longing, yearning, magnetic pull, it's grace, right? Curiosity. Whatever word we want to give this, it is a grace that is guiding the way. And it is to let go into the simple felt sense, the presence of this. And as there is a letting go into the presence, it brings us to a naturalness, an openness. It restores the natural connection to being. And then here now, the simple felt sense of being here now, just as you are. That there is freedom right here. There is peace right here. You are not abandoning anything or anyone. You are not leaving any part of yourself out. You are opening to a vaster landscape and softening into a depth of your true self that can actually hold all of the fragmented parts of yourself, all of the suppressed parts of yourself, to an incredible depth that is actually what allows all of the holding patterns to truly let go and release, right? Only really when we come into heart and we really drop into this soft belly of being, right? When we really relax all the way into true nature, into our own wholeness, do we then really have the capacity to hold ourselves and hold all of the exiled and suppressed, protected parts of ourself, right? And when we speak of these protected parts, we're not speaking of thoughts, we're not speaking of the me, we're speaking of patterns of consciousness. And the unraveling naturally happens, not as a project of the me and the mind in the psychological realm. The unraveling happens in the open landscape of consciousness. It's a refinement in the being that happens to refine itself into deeper and deeper, unprotected, unedited, unfiltered recognitions. And as the filters and conditioning and the patterns fall away, we become in remembrance, in cognition, deep conscious cognition of finer and finer frequencies of this true being that we are, right? So consciousness refines itself. It wears away, erodes away the patterns of protection and limitation that can create distraction and identification, and opens us up in the finer frequencies of our being. And here we start to recognize that everything is included, but it's not included from a mental perspective that's holding on and protective. It's all included as the deep knowing of being life itself, being life, living itself, right? So right here in the being, in the felt sense of being, there's a knowing of the being, and it's instantaneous, spontaneous in this moment. Are you here? Yes. Being the being, right here, spontaneous. There's an openness and a recognition. Are you here? Yes. How do you know this? Where do you know that you are here? You're not looking in a mirror. There's no thought telling you that you are here. It's a felt sense, right? It's a felt sense. And the felt sense, we could say, it could to start with feel like it's in the body, the felt sense. So, of course, we know that this being, it's not limited inside the body. So when we come to the felt sense of being, and it feels like it's the body, we just stay with it, just being, just being, just being. This felt sense. I am, I am, I am. Before the thought, the first thought, I. Just this felt sense of simple existence. Even if it starts off feeling like it's in the body or it's the body, it's to open to the felt sense is actually awareness. The felt sense is awareness, aware of itself. So it feels like body, but as you start to feel this felt sense of awareness, awareness is aware of itself, and the felt sense of being the aware being, it starts to be recognized to not be limited to the body. It's expanded beyond the felt sense of the physical body, right? Starts to open to the subtle, energetic body, right? Starts to open into a greater fullness. And the greater fullness is the felt sense of being everywhere. It's open, it's more subtle. It's consciousness perceiving itself. We could say the subtle body or the energy body starts to be recognizable. And then even the subtle body or the energy body starts to open to a felt sense of being that is infinite expansion, right? So we open through this felt sense of the body, the physicality, to a more subtle, softer felt sense of being, the presence. The I am, the I am, the I am. And this felt sense I am, as it's aware of itself and focused upon itself, just being, it starts to open into a finer felt sense of being. Now this will open to the finest possibility that the consciousness can open to, that it is ready for, right? So this is the finer frequency, the subtle, refined perception of consciousness, opening and recognizing itself. Now there's a layer of this awareness as we open to it that's aware of the thoughts and aware of the of the body sensations, aware of the denser layers. But as we open to this felt sense of being, I am, I am, I am, just here, now, before the story, before the thoughts, aware of the thoughts, aware of all that is moving and changing, there is this felt sense of being that is free and open, right? And in this freedom that is open and simple, there's a relaxation. So there's nothing to understand here. Everything that is being spoken of, and this invitation is an invitation where really the consciousness is speaking to itself, the heart is speaking to itself. So it looks like someone speaking to a group, but that's the surface appearance, right? It's not to negate that. There's that appearance here, but deeper in consciousness, the consciousness is speaking to itself, right? It's speaking to itself, and the words don't really even matter. It's the resonance of consciousness inviting an attunement, right? It's inviting a relaxation of the denser, protective frequencies to relax into the finest possible frequency of your own consciousness, and to feel yourself here now, and just to be with this felt sense here now. It's like an antenna, right? You're tuning in. You're tuning in to the finer and finer frequencies. And it can take for consciousness to speak to itself and bring the frequency to attune to bring the remembering, right? So in a way, it's as if you can't necessarily pick up the radio frequency until it starts crackling and buzzing and saying, I'm over here, this frequency, this frequency. And once there's the antenna of consciousness at the point that you feel yourself to be, is you start to pick it up and recognize in consciousness, oh, there's something here. I can attune to something finer. I can feel a part of myself, right? You start to open and attune to a finer frequency of yourself. And as you attune to this finer frequency of yourself, there's a remembering, oh yes, this. And you start to feel more whole and full. And in a way, there's a pull into the finer frequencies, because the finer frequencies are resonating with a freedom and an openness and an emptiness. And here, the stresses of the surface of life are just no longer as dominant, right? The stories of the surface of life are just no longer as dominant and pulling the attention, because the recognition here in consciousness is of yourself. You're recognizing a frequency of yourself, a resonance of yourself that's familiar and open and free and clear and safe and innocent and peaceful and loving, right? You're recognizing a clearer knowing of yourself, just being. And the felt sense is of opening up to the field. And so then the felt sense that starts off in the physicality of the body, you attune to a finer frequency that is more subtle, and you recognize, oh, this being that I am, it's not in the body, it's not the person or the mind, it's everywhere. It's free everywhere. And the sense of what the person is is like a point of laws of nature, right? We could say, to start with, it's seen as a character, but you can be aware of the character. You can be aware of that configuration. But you can feel quite clearly that what you are is not limited to that you are so much vaster than that the felt sense of what you are in truth is actually free of that all of the mental gymnastics that could be going on in the character, that in the felt sense of being, there's just a peace, a quietness, a silence, and a stillness. And there's a sanctuary here, a deep, open sanctuary. And there's more and more of a relaxation into this sanctuary, this silent sanctuary of yourself. So we're opening to dimensions of our own self, the one self. And where you start to feel the resonance of being, it's the same one being. We're all opening to the same one being. We're all resting in the same one being. And whatever the ability of consciousness is, the capacity that consciousness has to open to itself, is really where this maturity or ripeness comes to. You can't go any further than you are ready for. You will never be taken into something that you are not ready for, because the truth is that you are guiding yourself. No one is taking you anywhere. You are guiding yourself. You're absolutely guiding yourself and opening to the resonant recognition of yourself. And so mind consciousness drops into heart, which is the cosmic universal consciousness that is open and present and loving and happy and simple, empty of content. There's no story here. And it's not for the mind to wonder or worry, well, but what about the story? What about the person? What about all of that? Here, it's just about recognizing the freedom from that. You're not abandoning anything or leaving anything. You're opening to a vaster perspective so that really you can hold the whole of life in a different way. Life here it's held in a different way. It's actually recognizing its own graceful flow for what it is, right? In a way, what we're speaking of as holding life in a different way. We're not holding the me in a different way. We're opening to recognize what the me is as consciousness. And we're opening to be the consciousness that is holding itself as a flow of grace. That life living itself is flowing within itself, knowing itself, and constantly surrendering into itself and supporting itself. That nothing is left out. There's more wholeness here in the being. And yes, to start with, there's a sense of personal that remains, even though there's a knowing that you're not the person, you're not limited, you're not fractioned off as a victim, that you're one with all, that your true nature is bigger and vaster than the sense of person, that you are the presence, the vast open space in which person is happening. And yes, person, we could say, is included, but person isn't what person as a mind thinks it is, right? So it's just to be open that there's more to this than can be known maybe in the moment. And it's not about negating it because the mind doesn't understand it. It's about being in the frequency, the fineness, the aliveness of your own being that is guiding itself out of the sense of separation and protection into the wide open heart that is safe and free, and into this soft, deep belly of being that is whole and relaxed, right? Softening and softening and softening. And the natural refinement is that everything is included and everything is met. Nothing is negated. Everything is met. Nothing is denied. Everything is met. In fact, even all denial is invited to be released into this wholeness, right? Everything that has been denied, all of the parts of you that have been denied, right? And this is where we speak of, in this loving presence, we're parenting, but not in a psychological way. We're parenting all of the exiled parts of ourselves to be drawn into true safety, and that this safety is yourself, it's your heart, it's your being. It's opening to this part of yourself that is ever free and clear and innocent. And this part of you has never ever been tainted or disturbed. And so the constant invitation is to say, in this moment, can we be so open and include everything that we're not trying to shut anything off, we're not creating moods, we're not denying anything, we're not denying mind, we're not denying story, we're literally shifting the attention to the felt sense of being and recognizing that in the felt sense of being, there's an immediate sense of freedom, an immediate sense of loving presence, an immediate relaxation, an immediate sense of safety and holding and belonging, where everything is so fully included. And it's this aliveness of this moment, just as it is, actually really letting go of all trying and efforting and needing to be anything for anyone and anything for yourself, right? It's a deep relaxation into the heart, right? Where the mind consciousness and the struggle can unburden itself and merge into a softer openness of heart, right? Softening, letting go, relaxing into yourself, into a depth of safety and knowing of yourself, where the mind's projections and protections can actually be pulled in from the external, right? The projections and the protections, they're pulled away from the external and into the heart. They're surrendered into the heart. And there's more of a feeling of ease and softness here. Really like a relaxation of heart, that sometimes it feels like heart is opening, but really what is happening is the fog and the veils and the protections are lifting to reveal the ever open heart, the infinite heart that is your true self. This is your birthright. This is everything that we are here for in a human life, is to open to being, in a way, a true human being, not a limited human condition, but to living as the true human being is to actually open to the divine frequencies and a wholeness an innocence where really the divine wholeness can animate and take up residence in the humanness, right? We're restored to our greatest possibility. We're restored to our greatest potential as a human, to be open and illuminated and to be living as this innocence and purity and beauty, as love, right? To live as the love, right on the surface of life. So the part of this process that can feel challenging is the refinement, because as consciousness refines itself, it is constantly meeting its patterns of protection. And in that, it meets deeper and deeper hidden, suppressed places and invites everything to come into the light, to be met and released, right? So that's all happening as like an alchemical process of distillation of mind consciousness and thoughts and protections and ideas. It's all dissolving itself. But what allows the dissolving to happen is the knowing of the being, the recognition of the being. It brings the openness so that everything that's limited can know, oh, I can open into this vastness. Oh, I can let go into myself. Oh, I can feel these feelings and release this tension into myself. Now, the grace is that as we open to more of this, it can sometimes seem like companionships appear on the surface that also support us. But that's the reflection of our own openness. And when we open, we attract support because we're able to be supported and held, right? We're not guarded, right? As our guarding falls away, we start to attract and feel more safe in companionship and sharing this unfolding, right? It's all a reflection. Essentially, it's a reflection of us opening to ourselves, that we create the reflection out of that greater openness. We create the reflection of that, and the play of life offers us companionships and support so that we can experience on the surface of life, what does it feel like to be in a dynamic, relational dynamic, and be open and to be loving, right? As love. What does it feel like to be able to experience relational dynamics that we once would have been protected in total openness, or degrees of openness, right? As we're refining, right? Relationships shift and change. So we're not being asked to get rid of everything and all relationships and take to the cave. We're in this invitation, we're actually being invited to include everything, but to see from the clear perspective, see from the perspective that can include everything, right? And the true perspective that can include everything is the wide open landscape of consciousness, right? The mind actually cannot include everything, even though it thinks it wants to. The mind cannot include everything. Only wholeness can include everything. So in this moment, in the felt sense of being, it's to recognize this all-inclusive wholeness that is in the relaxation, in the knowing of the being. There's an openness that is naturally, we could say, inclusive, because how could it not be? How could wholeness not include everything? And so we open to an ability to actually receive more of ourself, open to our own protections and stresses and concepts, right? We open to receive it all so that it can relax into what all of that limited consciousness patterns, what it all belongs to, right? It refines, smooths itself out, merges into this wholeness. And so the lived experience is, in a way, pure experiencing. It's not an individual cut off island experience. It's pure experiencing. We could say that experience, and then we open to be the experiencer, like the seer. It swallows everything and remains as pure experiencing, right? That it's not the seer, the seen, and the seeing, the experiencer, the experience, and the experiencing. It merges into a oneness, which is just pure experiencing, consciousness, experiencing itself. And this is where we would say it's not someone having an experience, because all of that is experience, right? Being someone is an experience, and it's limited. All experience is limited. As we open to being the witness and the seer, and we know ourselves as the pure awareness, we can recognize that, oh, if I'm the seer of the seen, if I'm the experiencer of experience, then I cannot be the limited experience. I'm the bigger experiencer. I'm the awareness, the watcher of it all. And then as we recognize this, there's a merging in the flow into being pure experiencing, where there's no differentiation. But in this, there's still a sense of a unique flow of life, a unique flavor of laws of nature. But that uniqueness, that sense of individuality, is absolutely one with all that is. It's moving absolutely in oneness. And the beauty of feeling this is that we're actually out of the cycle of cause and effect, that this has that effect. And there's a recognition that it's all just flowing. It's all causeless, and it's all flowing in its causelessness. There's no more effect, right? The effect is experience, right? So it's all just flowing life just flowing. And the recognition here is that everything that's happening is somehow part of that oneness. It's grace. And we're refining into finer and finer recognitions, finer frequencies where this can be recognized, honing, culturing, and refining the consciousness, our own consciousness, right? So the whole unfolding is one glorious unfolding. And however deep we're living, it's reflected on the surface of life. So the lived experience, the pure experiencing, the lived experience really comes to be everything, but there's no limitation. There's no sense of personal, and yet there's a unique flow of laws of nature, but the unique flow, it's not referencing itself. It's not needing to validate or see itself. It's just all happening. In a way, we could say we come to our uniqueness and a depth of our uniqueness in the deepening freedom, the freedom to really be yourself, the freedom to where you're not protected and defended and living out ideas and concepts, the uniqueness actually gets more unique the more that the freedom that is inside is lived, right? So it's all so incredibly beautiful, this all-encompassing flow of life, this divine wholeness, where everything is utterly included. And all that is shifting is the perspective of seeing what this all is. We're ever opening into finer and finer frequencies so we can live with more ease and smoothness in our unique lived experience. It comes to be smoother because it's more aligned and attuned with the flow of life. And the sense of protection is eroding and collapsing into what is truly longed for, right? All longing is for the self. All desire is for the self. It's just that in the earliest stages of the human experience, it's not recognized, right? There's not a recognition of that longing. There's not an ability in the early stages to take that longing inside or to meet that longing in a different way. There's a maturing that happens, right? And we can all recall a time where there was that longing wasn't even brought maybe to a more spiritual context even, that the longing was like, I need that, I want that, right? But as we mature and ripen in consciousness, right, the consciousness itself is maturing. And as this maturing happens, it's like a natural evolution. We start to bring that longing to a spiritual context, and then we start to open more to that longing inside, right? We start to recognize the pointings that are calling us in and in and in. And this is a maturing of perception that happens in consciousness, that when we hear the pull in, there's a recognition. No one's doing anything. It's all happening all by itself. It's maturing itself. It's ripening itself, all by the light and flow of grace. Yeah. So in this moment, to feel the deep stillness and silence of being, the openness, the pure awareness, the aware being, that you are the aware being. You're aware of all the moving, changing. And as the aware being, you are deep and silent and still. So to start with, we point very, very, in a very focused way to this, because it pulls us to just come to an aware recognition of being the awareness, right? So there's a naturalness to the unfolding. We start by really pointing, you are not the mind, you are not the body, you are the awareness of the mind and body. You are not the person, you're the awareness of it, right? We speak like this so that we awaken the remembering of being the awareness, not to negate any part of life, but to reshift, refocus the perspective to something broader and more free. So the pointings that point to, you are not the mind, you are not the body, you are not the person, you are not the character, right? All of this are the earliest stages, pointings that are bringing us to recognize the awareness. I am, I am, I am. Just to recognize that there even is an awareness, is an awakening, right? That might seem preposterous now for the ones that have been listening for long periods of time. And sometimes even wondering, well, have I really shifted a perspective? Of course, the perspective has shifted, because there's a knowing of this awareness. There's a knowing that you are the awareness. There's a knowing that you're not limited, right? But we're ever refining and we're ever deepening. And yes, the perspective shifts deeply enough at some point that it blows out any possibility of doubting. But the refinement process goes on until everything is cleared, right? Till the vasanas and samskaras are seen through. And that is a natural unfolding, right? The vasanas and the samskaras, we could say the protections and the conditionings and the deeply held impressions in consciousness that are patterns, right? So it's all refining and it's all natural. The deeper that we can remember to be the awareness of, as we are the awareness of, in the knowing of being the awareness, the knowing itself is like an aliveness of presence. When we can feel this aliveness of presence, we're opening to heart, right? And depending on the depth of consciousness, we can taste it, glimpse it, sample it, and there will be protective patterns that pull us back, pull us back, pull us back. But we keep coming to the being with ever deepening resolve and recognition, so that those patterns don't keep pulling us into separation and victimhood. That we can really live in this sanctuary, know that this sanctuary is here, and in a way, navigate life from the sanctuary, let's say, right? What we always want to be very careful of is not creating delusion and not collaborating with delusion, right? So we can, in a way, touch the edge of delusion, but we don't go into the delusion where thoughts are believed, right? We have to stay in the reality, right? We can see how the whole functioning works, but we have to rest here, right? So that there's a knowing that even when identification happens, right? That's the delusion. There's an awareness of it, right? And the awareness of it allows it to do its magical unhooking refinement, right? So we always create what we need, whatever it looks like, whatever it turns out like. We're always creating exactly what is needed, right? Because what is creating it is consciousness creating an appearance, a reflection of itself, so that it can see itself, know itself in the light of awareness, and be itself, full and deep and free.